Hey, what's up everyone? This is Ill Factor from beatacademy.com, and in this video, I'm going to share with you some music production tips while recreating the beat in Disclosure's Talk featuring Khalid. So let's dive right in. Alright, so let's focus our attention over to the drums and the drum pattern. So here in Ableton Live, I've got a MIDI track loaded with a drum rack plugin and some sounds loaded inside that drum rack. So I'm going to double click the clip, and this is going to allow us to see the pattern that we have. So let's take a listen to the pattern. All right, we're going to focus on some sound design things to actually give a little bit of extra life to some of the sounds that we're using in the drum rack, particularly the open hi-hat. So when I listen to the reference, when I'm listening to the actual original record, the open hi-hat just sounds so silky, and it's got like this flange effect on it. So I thought, well, let's put a flanger on it. So I'm going to go to my audio effects folder here in Ableton Live, and I'm going to select flanger. And I'm going to open up my drum rack here, just highlight the open hi-hat, click and drag the flanger onto that sound. And this is going to affect just the open hi-hat and not the whole drum rack. So let's solo in on that hi-hat. As you can see, that flanger is giving some nice movement, some nice sonic movement to it. So we can go ahead and tweak this. Let's maybe drop the feedback to negative. And that makes it really metallic. And then we can just go ahead and adjust some of the parameters here. So maybe high pass, that means that we're only letting the highs pass from 243 hertz and above. That's cool there. And it just has that movement that's happening that we're hearing in the open hi-hat. And it's a really cool texture to add. So let's see what it sounds like with the rest of the drums. So it's cool. I might want to dial back the dry and wet just a little bit, but for the most part, I like the texture that it's giving. And then we're going to be using Ableton Live's Drum Bus plugin right on top of the drum rack so that it affects all of the sounds together. Everything coming out of the drum rack will be processed through the Drum Bus plugin. So we're giving some drive and saturation, and then we're adding some additional distortion just to the mid-range here with the crunch. And then I'm just actually dampening, meaning I'm taking away some of the high end, and that makes the drums feel a little bit warmer. And then we're using the transient knob to actually bring out some of the initial transients of the kick and all the other elements that we're hearing. And then I have the drive set to hard here, which adds some extra low end harmonics, which is really good to get some extra beef out of the bottom end, and just compression. The compression set on the drum bus is set to a fixed rate. So I'm just dialing in the trim, the amount of input being driven into the compression. So let me play you the drums without it. Yeah, pretty weak. And then we go ahead and turn this on. And now for the bass, we're going to go with using a sub. So in this case, we're going to focus on using a synthesizer with a sine waveform. So I'm going to head over to my instrument folder. I'm going to choose wavetable for this, but you can use any one or two oscillator synth that you might have in your DAW to follow along. And as I mentioned, we're going to start with the sine wave because any of these other waveforms will be a little bit too bright to use. So we'll stick with the sine wave. Let's take a listen to the pattern. All right, and now what we're going to do is just shift the octave down for the first oscillator. So right now we'll go -24. We're going to go 2 octaves down. And I definitely recommend that you're using headphones or studio monitors because there's going to be some nuances that we're making here that won't be able to be heard on your phone or even a laptop speaker. And that's cool. We can just make sure that we switch from polyphonic to monophonic. That way there aren't any notes overlapping each other and it gets a little muddy and messy down there in the low end. And I'm just going to adjust the amplification attack so we're not getting the initial, this little sharp attack from the sub. I'm going to let the kick drum of the beat do that. And then what we're going to do is open up a second oscillator, and this will go down an octave, just one octave. So this would be -12 semitones. And that just gives a little bit more energy to the bass line, but we're going to need to balance it out by lowering it in volume. And the cool thing about using the wavetable is that you can kind of slightly go between the sine and the triangle. But if you're using some other synth that doesn't have that ability, try seeing what a triangle would sound like layered on top of that. And then bringing just the filter frequency down. And I like doing that because it lets the notes being heard. So you can actually tell the different melodic movements of the bass line by having the triangle or something a little bit brighter and an octave higher on the sub bass line. All right, let's see what that sounds like with the drums. Okay, so why don't we add a little bit of saturation to the filter drive here. So I'm going to put some filter drive on there, maybe about 5 dB, see what that sounds like. And I'm also going to use a compressor, and here's why I'm using a compressor on the bass. I'm doing it because certain notes, when they play, are going to resonate, and they're going to sound a lot more louder in volume than others. So I want to be able to control that and keep the dynamics overall balanced with the sub bass line. And this is particularly when we switch up to that G2 up here. That's a lot louder than, and then just switch over to, so that G really resonates really a lot. So I'm going to use a compressor to just kind of balance that out. All right, so that just maybe a little bit more release there, and there you go. I'll just go 1 or 2 dB up in gain. And then I'll go ahead and let's put I'll just do a little bit saturation overall, just to give a little bit more drive and see what that sounds like with the beat. Now I think the notes are too up front, so let's lower, either switch from triangle back to the sine wave. That's much better. So even though we heard the notes pretty well with the triangle, it still was just a little bit too much. So I brought it back down to a sine wave, still have it down in volume at the second oscillator. So we're good with that. Now, at the very beginning of the song, there's this really cool retro sounding synth part that's also used throughout the song as well. So let's focus our attention on recreating that. So I'm going to head over to my instruments, and we're going to use our wavetable. You could follow along using any 2 oscillator synth as well. So I'm going to start off by using a sawtooth, and we're going to start here because the tone of a sawtooth waveform is a lot brighter than, let's say, the sine wave, which is what we use for the sub bass. So let's go ahead and take a listen to the chords. All right, so we're going to do a little bit of adjusting, but when I listen to the sound, it's got this cool modulating thing happen once the notes are released. It's got this, like the pitch is a little wavy, and that's what gives it this really cool, authentic, retro-y type of tone to it. So it's really cool. So first, let's start by adding another oscillator here. So I'm going to go to oscillator 2, and I'm also going to choose a sawtooth waveform. And we're going to just lower this in volume just to kind of balance this out, but also give this a little bit slight detuning, so this will give a little bit of the chorus effect. All right, so we're just going to lower the volume a little so that the chorus isn't that dominant. All right, then what we're going to do is we're going to head over to the LFO, and we're going to use that LFO to cause that cool little wavy motion we hear at the end of those chords. So clicking the matrix in the wavetable specifically allows you to map out what is going to control what. So if I wanted the LFO to control the pitch of oscillator 1, I would need to go to oscillator 1, click the semitone, and I need to go to oscillator 1 pitch and assign that to LFO. So let's go ahead and send a little bit of that to the LFO. So let's try a little, maybe around 10, and see where that gets us. And then we can always adjust accordingly. So now if we play it, sounds like some, archaic video game thing, right? So I need to go over here to the LFO and I need to adjust that accordingly. So right now the LFO is repitching oscillator 1 way too much. It's really too drastic. So why don't we set the rate or the amount first? Let's control the amount of that LFO. Maybe something around here. And then let's change the rate, the time that it's actually going up and down. Now, that's a little too wild. So cool thing is here is you can actually determine how soon the LFO does its thing. So do you want to delay the LFO, meaning does it happen immediately when the sound is being heard or triggered, or does it just play for a little while and then we get to hear the LFO? So that's what we're going to do. We're going to, as you can see here, I like how it visually draws out what's happening. So we're going to increase this. Let's just try something around 7.75 seconds. And then what you're seeing here is the sound will start a little straight, but then starts to get a little wobbly and wavy towards the end. So you can see how we're not having the dramatic LFO happen at first, but yet we're seeing it happen at the tail end of the sound, which is really cool. So that's exactly what we're going for. So I'm going to increase the amount a little bit, go to that second oscillator, maybe lower it just a little bit here, and see what that gets us. That's cool. Let's give a little bit of drive here. I'm going to go and choose some filter drive. I'm going to just give that a little bit and even give another sub harmonic. We're going to put the sub on. That way there's a sub frequency just playing an octave lower. And we'll just kind of just gauge this and see and get the balance just right. So I have it really, really, really low. And then let's add a little bit of overall unison, or just detuning both of the oscillators together. So for this, we're going to go over here to the unison section, and we're going to just choose classic and see what that gives us. That's pretty cool. I kind of like where it's at right now. So let's go ahead and take that and add some dimension by using some reverb directly onto this sound. So we'll click the reverb, drag that right there, and let's balance the dry and wet signal first. Might be a little too much, so we'll lower the decay and take some high end from the incoming signal. So we'll cut a little of the high end out and just go ahead and just lower the dry and wet just a little bit more. I might want a little bit more amount. I want that little wavy thing happening to be a little bit more dominant. So we'll just crank a little bit more of the amount on the LFO. Let's see what it sounds like with everything else. So I just gave a little bit more decay on the reverb and just cranked up a little bit more of the dry and wet. Cool. Now we're going to focus our attention on the switch that the synth does in the verses. So it goes from that nice retro synth patch that we just created to a cool, almost plucky type sound. So let's go back to our trusty wavetable. And what we're going to do is, instead of having a bright sound like in the sawtooth, we'll stick to having a more mellow one like the sine wave. So let's go ahead and solo the part. So we're using the same chord progression and the same pattern as the other patch. So now what we're going to do is shape the actual amp envelope here. We're going to shape the actual character of the sound. So let's bring the sustain down so the notes won't sustain while they're being held. And the release, we're going to shorten that so that after the note plays, the length of time you hear them is shorter. All right, so I'm going to go an octave higher. So I'm going to go to the transpose section here, and I'm going to hit plus 12. All right, now I'll just lower the frequency here and a little bit of resonance. And we'll turn on the second oscillator and repeat the same thing, but we're going to detune this one a little bit. Let's see what happens if we put this an octave higher. That's cool, because that octave higher layer really kind of helps give more of that cool little mallet type vibe. And let's see what happens when we put a little bit of the unison on, or the overall detune. So that's cool. That's a pretty good vibe. What I'm going to do now is hold while selecting this instrument in Ableton Live. I'm just going to hit Command G, and that's going to group. It's going to create an instrument rack. And so I'm going to layer this with another wavetable. So I'm just simply going to hit Command D to layer, to duplicate that second layer, and I'll color code this one with a different color so I know which one. And then I'm soloing this one because we're, instead of the sine wave, we'll go ahead and switch up to another wavetable here. So oscillator 1 will go to a sawtooth. Now this is going to be layered on top of the first one that we've done. But we're going to do something cool. We're going to go to the frequency here, and we're going to go to envelope 2, and we're going to say the filter frequency is going to be mapped to envelope 2. We'll just give, maybe send it about 42 to taste. And what we're going to do is just shape the character of how fast the frequency opens up. Now this gives us a nice cool pluck type vibe. So now let's just balance out the volume. And maybe just send a little bit of reverb to this and see what that sounds like. Well, hey, thank you so much for watching. I hope this video has been helpful for you. And as my gift to you for watching, I'd love to send you a sample pack loaded with some of the sounds that we've used in this video. So simply click the link below in the description box to download the sample pack. And it's loaded with construction kits, loops, transition effects, one-shots, and they all work on any DAW. Just click, drag and drop, and you're ready to go. And as a bonus, they're 100% royalty free, so feel free to use them in your projects and share that with the rest of the world. You can click the link below in the description box or visit www.beatacademy.com/pack. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.